Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye. Sharvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Tadayantasto hi abhadrani vidunoti suhishrutam Nashtaprayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya Bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. Krishna everyone. So today we're going to be reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 22, verses 32 and 33. Nata paratara loke pumsa swarta vyatikrama yadadhyanyasya preyastvam atmana swavyatikramat. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. There is no stronger obstruction to one's self-interest than thinking other subject matters to be more pleasing than one's self-realization. Purport: Human life is especially meant for self-realization. Self refers to the super-self and the individual self, the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entity. When, however, one becomes more interested in the body and bodily sense gratification, he creates for himself obstructions on the path of self-realization. By the influence of Maya, one becomes more interested in self-gratification, sense gratification, which is prohibited in this world for those interested in self-realization. Instead of becoming interested in sense gratification, one should divert his activities to satisfy the senses of the Supreme Soul. Anything performed contrary to this principle is certainly against one's self-interest. Verse 33. Artendriyartrabhidhyanam Salvartapanavoranam Brahmshito-jnana-vijnanat Yena Vishati-mukhyatam. Translation: For human society, constantly thinking of how to earn money and apply it for sense gratification brings about the destruction of everyone's interests. When one becomes devoid of knowledge and devotional service, he enters into a species of life like those of trees and stones. Jnana or knowledge means to understand one's constitutional position, and vijnana refers to practical application of that knowledge in life. In the human form of life, one should come to the position of jnana and vijnana. But if, despite this great opportunity, one does not develop knowledge and practical application of knowledge through the help of a spiritual master and the Shastras, in other words, if one misuses this opportunity, then in the next life he is sure to be born in a species of non-moving living entities. Non-moving living entities include hills, mountains, trees, plants, etc. This stage of life is called punyatam or mukyatam, namely making all activities zero. Philosophers who support stopping all activities are called shunyavadi. By nature's own way, our activities are to be gradually diverted to devotional service, but there are philosophers who, instead of purifying their activities, try to make everything zero or void of all activities. This lack of activity is represented by the trees and the hills. This is the kind of punishment inflicted by the laws of nature. If we do not properly execute our mission of life and self-realization, nature's punishment will render us inactive by putting us in the form of trees and hills. Therefore, activities directed towards sense gratification are condemned herein. One who is constantly thinking of activities to earn money and gratify the senses is following a path which is suicidal. Actually, all human society is following this path. Some way or the other, people are determined to earn money or get money by begging, borrowing, or stealing and applying for sense gratification. Such civilization is the greatest obstacle in the path of self-realization. नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पश्चात देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, everyone. I'd like to seek the blessings of all the senior Vaishnavas here, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this and purify myself. And please forgive me for any shortcomings beforehand. Okay, so in these two powerful verses, as you all know, Sanat Kumara, he's warning Prithu Maharaj about the greatest threat to human life, which is deviation from self-realization. And he declares, there is no stronger obstruction to one's self-interest than thinking other subject matters to be more pleasing than one's self-realization. So this means that whenever we prioritize material goals like money, fame, sense enjoyment, or status above our own spiritual progress, that means that we're actually sabotaging ourselves, and we're sabotaging our actual self, our actual best interest. And these diversions, in the beginning, they might seem pleasing, but in reality, they're the most dangerous distraction. So, to make this practical, we can think of a person who's given a rare and powerful medicine. And Srila Prabhupada gives this example regularly. So instead of taking the medicine, they spend their time polishing the bottle or just showing it off. So similarly, this human form of life is a rare gift that's meant for self-realization, just how the medicine is meant to be used for an illness. But often we waste this life chasing distractions, which can include social media, movies, entertainment, gossip, or running after material qualifications. So all of these can give momentary satisfaction, but they'll pull us away from the true purpose of life. And the true purpose of life and that real best interest is to remember the Supreme Lord and awaken our love for Krishna. So moving forward, Sanat Kumara explains that by the influence of Maya, one can begin to think that bodily sense gratification is more valuable than spiritual progress. So we often meet people, including I'm sure many of ourselves at some point have said that um, this is not the time. This is not the time in life for spirituality, and there's more important things to chase and focus on completely, like career or money, etc. But what's being mentioned here isn't just a philosophical point. We can see it everywhere around us. So we can see how society will glorify a person who becomes a millionaire, right? Even if they are arrogant or miserable, even if they have bad character, society will still praise a certain politician or a certain celebrity, a certain millionaire. But if someone spends their life in devotion, humility, and service, society might tend to look at them as unsuccessful, or someone, without any um, yeah, on someone who's unsuccessful or naive, right? Just following something for no reason or making nothing out of their life. So this is like a warped value system, and it's a sign of society being under the control of Maya and individuals being under the control of Maya. And Srila Prabhupada explains that acting against our real self-interest and thinking that our self-interest is to find pleasure is exactly how the soul becomes entangled in the cycle of birth and death. So in the next verse, um, we see an even more severe warning. For human society, constantly thinking of how to earn money and apply it for sense gratification brings about the destruction of everyone's interests. When one becomes devoid of knowledge and devotional service, he enters into the species of life like those of trees and stones. So in other words, when we use our intelligence and our time for just accumulating wealth and enjoyment without knowledge, jnana, and realization, vijnana, that's when we risk falling down to the lower forms of life because we're not making use of the human form of life that we have been gifted. And, one may interpret this to be metaphorical, like this is the law of karma. But, Srila Prabhupada, he always shows that the Bhagavatam is being very straightforward here. So those who misuse this human form, who fail to develop spiritual knowledge and devotional service like it's meant for the human form of life, may be reborn as trees, mountains, or non-moving beings. And this same teaching is echoed in the Bhagavad Gita 3.27, where Krishna says, Prakriti Kriyamanani Gune Karmani Sarvasa. All actions are done by the modes of nature, but the soul thinks I am the doer. So when we are attached to enjoying the fruits of our work, thinking that we are the enjoyers or controllers, then we become more and more entangled into this material bondage. And Sanat Kumara, he wants us to completely shatter this illusion. And there's a clear contrast made in these verses between the person who chases sense gratification and the person who pursues devotional service. So devotional activities such as chanting the holy names, Nam Sankirtan, reading scriptures like the Bhagavatam, serving devotees, sadhu sangha, worshiping the deity Archana, and many more, forms of devotional service, including leading a regulated life, bring us closer to our true self. So on the other hand, if we're always just scheming for wealth and sensual pleasure and sense gratification, that'll pull us farther away. So we can reflect on another real life example here. So a person might work hard their entire life, investing all their energy into building a business, buying a house, earning recognition, but at the end, when old age comes, the body always fails and they have to leave everything behind. And at that time, if one hasn't cultivated remembering the Lord, then what can they actually carry with them at death? There's nothing. So in contrast, if a humble devotee has nothing materially, but chants the holy name sincerely, hears about Krishna regularly, he will carry the greatest wealth, which is bhakti, and that's eternal. So the example of King Bharat from the fifth canto is also relevant here. So even though he was an advanced devotee who renounced his kingdom, he went through all the proper stages of life, keeping keeping Narayan in the center. And at the end, he left everything, went to the forest, went to the renounced stage of life. He still became slightly attached to this deer in his later years, and then soon that attachment grew and grew. But just a small deviation caused him to take birth as a deer in his next life. So even if a great soul like Bharat could fall due to such a subtle distraction, what to speak of us? And this teaches us how dangerous even small diversions from self-realization can be. So Srila Prabhupada makes a bold statement in the purport to verse 33. Such a civilization is the greatest obstacle in the path of self-realization. And we see this as true, right? Many times it's easy to become distracted, when everyone around you is distracted and or when there's no support around you in the society. So this refers to a society obsessed with making money, gratifying the senses, and everyone's always competing, whether it's at work or school, everyone's always competing for dominance. Even it can even be in a spiritual setting. There's always, you know, people are always having a small place for their own self-interest. So Sanat Kumara calls this path suicidal. And I was wondering, like, why was he using that word? And it's explained that because it leads the soul further from the cycle of birth and death, away from its eternal nature. So even though Sanat Kumara is calling this uh, path suicidal, there is still hope, right? Sanat Kumara already explained in the earlier verses how to reverse this tendency, which is by practicing bhakti yoga and engaging in the nine processes of devotional service, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, and so on. So when one develops attachment to the Supreme Lord, and when that attachment grows stronger and stronger, the taste for sense gratification naturally fades because we're developing a taste in love for Krishna. So therefore, Instead of trying to suppress our desires artificially, the process of Krishna consciousness is actually purifying our desires from within, and we learn um, to desire what's actually conducive for Krishna consciousness. So a practical step we can take as we're closing off is to evaluate our own life. We can ask ourselves these questions. How much time do I spend on sense-driven activities versus spiritually nourishing ones? What kind of people do I associate with? Is it those who inspire me to inspire me in bhakti, or those who distract me from it? And do I regularly hear the glories of the holy name and the Lord, or am I more drawn to worldly talk and discussion? So even though, we may not reach a stage of perfection, it's still good to ask ourselves these questions to be a reminder to regulate ourselves. And Srila Rupa Goswami says in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Anya Bhilasita Sunyam Jnana Karma Dhyanavritam. Pure bhakti is free from all other desires and coverings. This purity is the goal of human life. It is attainable, but we must protect our bhakti from the weeds of material ambition. So to conclude, these verses from the four Kumaras are both like a warning and a wake up call to us. So they're showing us what's at stake if we misuse this gift of human life. But they're also showing us the real path that we need to take to freedom, which is by avoiding bad association, material association, cultivating genuine devotional service, and making Krishna the center of our thoughts, words, and actions. So by understanding this, we can try to, not be among the people who become lost by forgetting their true position with Krishna, but instead we can take advantage of this human life that we're given, and we can become those fortunate souls who are able to mold their lives in a way that they can't live without hearing about Krishna and chanting Krishna's name. And yeah, that's all I have prepared for today. Thank you for the opportunity.